Hello, good morning. How are you? I hope you are all well. Today we are going to start a new way of doing a lesson. This time you will be at your home and I will be at mine. We all understand the situation that we are going through, and that's why we have to be responsible and patient, okay? I've prepared this PowerPoint for you to revise because there are some parts of it that we have already made, that we have already studied in class. But as we've had this period of staying at home, I decided that my PowerPoint will be from the very beginning, right? So ready, steady, go. Well, we started by talking about prehistory, and we said that prehistory is the period in which there is no writing. It talks about, is the way we have to express the period of time which starts when the first humans appeared and it finishes at the moment when writing was started to be used. If we have a look at this chart, you will see the times, the time that is dedicated to prehistory, what we call prehistory, and the time which is called history. Let's go on. I'm not going to stop on this longer than necessary because we have studied this in class, we've done different activities, we watched a documentary film on this, but I just want to remind you the most important features which characterized human evolution. And it is the moment when we separate from that common ancestor that we share with primates. And that moment is marked by the first step when primates went down trees and started to walk upright on two legs. As we said, this gave them a wider field of vision because the grass was very high and they had to stand up to be able to see. They also had two hands free and consequently they could start using tools. The use of tools led them to be able to hunt and gather food, fruits mainly, and they also found fire, which is one of the most important discoveries in human history, because that led them to cook food and consequently all the face features like jaws, teeth, etc. started to adapt to that new way of eating, which was a healthier diet. Another thing which was helpful to develop hominids was the fact that our head was on top of our skeleton, and that made us have a cranial capacity bigger to contain a more developed brain. That also led us to have a flatter forehead, el front més pla, and a chin. All these things, all these changes increased human intelligence and provided us with the ability to communicate, that is to say, to have language. But let's start by Paleolithic, which is, as the name says, paleo, as I said in class, means old, and lithic means stone. So this is the time we call it because of the use of stones as tools. That was sometime about 40,000 years ago. At that moment, humans were hunters and gatherers, cazadores y recolectores. They lived in communities. They lived from hunting animals, gathering fruits, fishing, and that's why we call them predators. But an important thing is that they hunted in groups. They used different strategies to trap mammals, insects, reptiles, and small animals. So they ate their meat and used their skin to make clothes. The bones of these animals they hunt were used to make tools. The tendons were used to make rope, and with ropes they could make clothes. But a very important thing is that they were nomadic. It means that they had to move from one place to the other because they had to follow animals, and of course the seasons, the cold, etc., made animals migrate, and consequently they also had to migrate after these animals. But let's go back to the most important discoveries, or the most important discovery in human history. Sometime around 400,000 years ago, Homo erectus discovered fire. As we said in class, probably by chance, per casualidad, because probably a ray, un raig, a thunder, hit some stone which produced some sparks, and probably those sparks would start to burn some straw, and from there they started to feel that light produced warmth, and it was good to frighten away wild animals. It was also good to light their caves and to cook food. So it was Neanderthals, the ones who started to produce fire. They didn't have to keep it anymore. They could light fires by themselves. An important development in these societies is tools. At the beginning, tools were simple, very big stones which only had a cutting edge. Most of the times they used flint, which is sílex or pedernal, and with the running of time, these tools started to be better. Instead of one cutting edge, they had both sides were good for cutting, and they started to make finer pieces. They also used other materials like bone or antler, and to make harpoons, needles, etc. And how do we know all this? Well, archaeologists study locations which we call archaeological sites, and they provide a lot of information that about what people who lived there used to do in the past, the materials they used, the food they ate, the fire they made, everything. And how can we study all this? Because of layers, which are called strata. And these stratos are the ones which preserve all the remains that belonged to these people in this period of time. After that, around 10,000 years ago, the Neolithic started. At this time, people started to polish stone. So they made tools which were more precise, better for the needs they had. They learned from nature, from observing nature. They started to learned that if you plant a seed in land, it could grow a plant which could be good to eat. They began to breed animals in captivity. They domesticated animals, of course. They settled in villages, in groups. So instead of being nomadic, they stayed there in these groups, in these villages, so that they could look after crops and animals. They invented more specialized tools for their new activities, and they also invented, or probably by chance as well, some new objects, pottery, which was very important because that meant that they could store and transport food, cooked food mainly. They also learned how to weave out of natural fibers, and they developed the use of spindle, la rueca, and they started to make yarn from that. Comenzaron a hacer fil a partir de ahí. After that, in the year 7000 before Christ, the Metal Ages started. This is the new part. We haven't talked about this in class, but it's very easy for you. What do we understand by this Metal Ages? Well, it covers quite a long period of time. And we have to say that the first metal that they started to use was gold, and they used it to make jewelry and ornaments. But apart from that, they also learned later on, they also learned to use copper, cobre, el cobre, and they started by heating the metal, escalfar el metal, and heating it, it made it easier to shape. It was easy to give it a form if it was heat. They developed a new technique, which was the technique of casting, la fundición, and from that what they did was that molten metal, el metal fundit, was poured into molds to make objects. Posaven el metal que s'havia fundit en uns moldes i a partir d'ahí esos moldes tenien la forma que ells volien que tinguera, de punta de fletxa, etc. After that, the year is 3000 before Christ, we start what we call the Bronze Era. Artisans began to mix copper and tin. By the way, there is a mistake here. Tin is written T-I-N, tin. No, not the way it is written, tin. Stañ, el estaño. Well, they mix this to create bronze. Bronze is the mixture of copper, cobre, and tin, stañ, heated by charcoal. They use charcoal to heat these two metals together. And by doing this, they obtained harder metal that could be sharpened. And after that, we have the Iron Age, that was around 2000 years before Christ. This metal opened a new variety of objects that they could make because it was very hard, very resistant, and therefore they could create weapons and tools and many other things useful for agriculture, for hunting, for improving their life with that. On page 165, we have the process of doing this. You have to read it. You don't need to learn it by heart. No es preciso saberlo de memoria, Marta Meseguer. But it is good to have a look at it and understand how they did these things. Now we move to another transformation in the Neolithic society, and that was the appearance of artisans. As they had these new possibilities of creating tools, they started to specialize, and so a new class started, artisans. These metal goods were good for trade, they improved sailing, and also the invention of the wheel made it easier, the transport of goods. So specialization led to these groups be wealthier and more powerful. So a new group of people appeared, and those were the warriors, which emerged under a king, a leader, who governed the tribe. This is important because here in the Mediterranean, this is part of our tradition, of our culture. There are many monuments, many megalithic monuments in the Mediterranean and in Spain, in the peninsula as well. So there are megaliths, as the name means, mega, big, liths, stone. They are monuments made out of big stones, as you can see in the pictures. We have different types. They appear in Europe around the 5th millennium before Christ, and the most important ones. There are other agrupations of stones, but the most frequent ones are menhirs, which are large, very large standing stones, dolmen, which were burial chambers where they buried important people, and they were made, as you can see in the picture, by 2 standing stones with a stone slab, stone roof. And the other one is the stone circle, also called cromlech. There are quite a few. The one in the picture is Stonehenge in the south of England, and it is made of upright stones and horizontal slabs. They could be related, this sort of monument, of megalith monument, is considered to be related to agriculture or to the sun worship. But we may think of them as primitive, but that's not wholly true, because they were also good artists, and that's what we can see from the very beginning, because in the Paleolithic, people started to paint caves walls, what is called parietal art, and that was about 30,000 years ago. But not only this, apart from this, they also made statues with different materials. What's the meaning of these paintings? We don't really know. The meaning could be it could have spiritual and magical function. Sometimes they think that they painted animals because they wanted to have good luck in hunting, but we don't really know. This is just speculation. But they also had different decorative arts. For instance, small pieces of slate or calcite which were engraved or painted. The picture here represents pottery and represents iron tools and different tools from different periods of time. The picture on your right represents one of these Venus figurines, which were considered goddess of fertility. That's the interpretation that we have. Why do we do this? Because these figures, these women statues, are represented with their body parts, the body parts related to sex and having children. They are very exaggerated. Big breasts, thighs, hips, etc. And the face is not represented at all, and arms are nearly non-existent. So that is because we historians considered that they were fertility goddess, kind of fertility goddess. Well, and what do we have here in the Iberian Peninsula? Because there has always been, as we said, an interest for art. So from Paleolithic age, we have also remains and paintings in caves. But let's start by saying that the first inhabitants that we can find here in the peninsula came from Africa 800,000 years ago, and the remains of them have been found in Atapuerca in Burgos, and they belong to what we mentioned at the beginning of the unit as Homo antecessor. And because this interest of art that we have always had, humans have always had, the most important discoveries that have been found here in the peninsula are the cave paintings in Cantabrian areas, the most important Altamira cave, with a very realistic and naturalistic paintings of animals, but also in the Mediterranean areas, there are these representations of everyday life scenes. The one in the picture is found in Bicorp, and it represents a woman trying to get honey from a bee nest. In Neolithic age, and especially because of the arrival of settlers who came from eastern Mediterranean areas, pottery starts to spread, and we have different types of pottery, very characteristic of different groups of people living in the peninsula. For instance, Cadian pottery, which is the first one, is decorated with imprint of shells. And there is also another important group of people who have this Almagra pottery, which is characterized by its red color. From Metal Ages, we have a map here of the different areas where we can find this type of pottery. We have the Argar culture, which is from the Bronze Age, and it's located in Almeria, in the southeast of the peninsula. And we also have the development of iron metallurgy thanks to new colonizers coming from different areas of Europe. Well, and this is all. I hope you enjoy my PowerPoint, especially dedicated to you. And I ask you to do your homework, to work every day as if you were going to school, and be patient, because this is something which is quite extraordinary. We don't know how long it's going to last, but honestly, I rely on you, confíe en vosotros. I'm sure you are going to be patient and you will do all the things that you have to do. And I hope to see you very soon. I'm really looking forward to seeing you very, very soon. My best wishes for your work.